Hey there, welcome along to another video here on my channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk and we're going to be looking today at a new item that's come out recently. We're going to be doing a full-on box opening and review on it. So without further ado, let's take a look. What we've got here is one of the new wagons from Hornby, and there's quite a few coming through because Hornby has started to retool to varying degrees its entire range. Now we've covered the 8 plank, the 5 plank and the 3 plank, and so if you want to catch up with those, go back and have a look at some of my other reviews. We go through them in some great depth. But this is the first time one of their new 6 plank wagons has reached the market. So I saw this and it was a twofer with this. Firstly, I wanted to review the 6 plank wagon because I thought you might be really interested to see up close and personal just how good this wagon may or may not be. But also, if you look at the livery, JB Scholes and Sons of Bolton. So this is a local wagon. How could I refuse? So let's have a look on the end here. We've got a catalogue number of R6871, and it says there 6 plank wagon, Scholes and Sons, number 778. And I'm pretty certain that Hornby will have been working off a photograph of a real wagon. As to the accuracy of this wagon to that photograph, I'm not sure. I know certainly with the Southeastern and Chatham Railway 3 plank wagon that we did a box opening and review on a little while back, I've seen a photograph of the prototype wagon, and there's a lot of artistic license gone on in terms of the suitability of the base wagon for the livery. So I haven't found a photograph of the full-sized real version of this wagon, so I can't really comment too much on that. But certainly it's nice to see. We're getting that same old problem. I think we're going to have to just pause for technical difficulties whilst I find a way into this box. Right, after much exploitation of the Anglo-Saxon tongue, we have managed to gain entry into the box, and it's pretty standard now, Hornby packaging, and they are actually, I've mentioned this before, the same form factor as the boxes that are coming from Bachmann, from Dapol, so it does actually make them quite handy for stacking away for storage. Inside, free the wagon from its blister pack. There's nothing else to add to it, so what you see is what you get. There's no user addable bits and pieces, but my first impressions of this are actually that it's a pretty nice tidy little wagon. The wheelbase is quite short, but that's okay. I think we've come used to having wagons which are actually a little bit over scale length from the likes of Bachmann. So when you see a wagon that's got this shorter wheelbase, it does stand out, but actually it's prototypical. Wagons over time got longer as loads increased and the technology and the materials building them improved. But certainly right through until probably the 1950s, 1960s, a lot of wagons were very, very short wheelbase like this. So it's nice to see that Hornby have actually managed to capture that short wheelbase, and they haven't gone for the same problem that has kind of fouled up their 5 plank wagon that we did a review of in a previous video, where they'd kept the Airfix top and just retooled the chassis. So the chassis was a lovely chassis, but it was so over length, it just looked weird. That hasn't happened in this case, and it's pleasing to see that Hornby have perhaps taken on board some of the criticisms and made sure that the base for this wagon is actually a proper scale length. Okay, well, I talked a little bit about comparison, so I've got here one of the 3 plank wagons from Hornby, the retooled variety. And what we can see is actually that it's sat on exactly the same chassis. And you might say, well, that seems to be cheating a little bit, but actually a lot of these wagons were built around a fairly common standard underframe, so it's not unusual even on the full-size wagons for this to be the case. And it's nice to see that Hornby have recognised that the 3-plank wagon had such a good chassis that to put it across to the new 6-plank wagon actually just added to the 6-plank wagon rather than detracted from anything else. For a fuller comparison, I did talk about the overscale length on the 5-plank and the 8-plank. So you can see there, when we compare these together, the 6-plank and the 3-plank are exactly the same wheelbase. But then when we go to the 5-plank, there's a definite increase in length there. It's actually quite markedly so, and this is far too long. The 8-plank as well suffers from the similar problem, so we can see there that the 6-plank is so much shorter than that 8-plank as well. Now, I did a bit of research on JB Scholes. It's a little bit hard actually to turn up an awful lot of information, but what I could gather is that they had a number of sites around Bolton, and certainly their head offices were right in the centre, actually quite near the model shop which I got this from, the Bolton Model Mart. The owner of that shop did tell me that the JB Scholes offices used to be just down the road from there. But in my research, I've also turned up that there was a site in Astley Bridge, and I suspect that they may have been based at the goods station that we did a little walkabout tour on as one of the Jennycam videos, probably about a year and a half to 2 years ago now. We explored some of the aspects of the Astley Bridge branch, so it's interesting to see that what we've got here is a wagon that may have been no stranger to that branch back in the day. It's also clear that JB Scholes was quite an old company, so I see reference to it from the 1890s going right through to certainly 1930s or so. So there's certainly this particular wagon, the chassis on it suggests to me that this is perfectly suitable for pre-1923, but would not look out of place amongst big 4 locomotives in stock in the 1930s. As to how well travelled they would have been, I'm not entirely sure. It tended to be that unless that they were supplying a very specialist type of coal or product, the wagons wouldn't really have strayed all that far. Because for a lot of purposes, coal was coal, so why would you buy coal from the other end of the country when it would have to be shipped in? So I'm not really quite sure how far ranged these wagons would have been, but certainly around Bolton, North Manchester, they would have trundled about and maybe reached further afield for other customers if there was a specific reason, but my research hasn't really been able to turn up anything like that. In terms of my own modelling interests, it's nice to see a wagon that's suitable for the pre-grouping period rather than being a re-livery on a post-grouping base wagon. This wagon has all the hallmarks of being a suitable pre-1923 wagon. In terms of its build quality, it's pretty sturdy. We've got a lot of separately applied bits and pieces, and as I said before when we reviewed the 3-plank wagon and the 5-plank wagon, Hornby have kind of had to up their game with these. They've rested on their laurels far too long, and they've been overtaken by the competition. In the main, really, by firstly Bachmann, but then Oxford Rail really have come on leaps and bounds and put the older Hornby wagons into the shadows. Hornby have therefore come back with this, and they've tried to up the ante. So the biggest area where this is so is the underframe detail. And you can see in here, the underframe is actually pretty exquisite. We've got so much detail in there, and this is following on from what Oxford Rail were doing. It has to be said that a lot of this is detail for the sake of detail, because normally in a general run of events, you wouldn't really see most of this, but it's nice to see that it's there. And what it actually does say to me is that, hey, look at this, we're Hornby, we've put in so much attention to detail that even the bits you don't normally see are done up to a really high standard. So it leaves me enthused that the rest of the wagon is also to a similar high standard. We can see there that we've got the representation of the wooden chassis wagons. And it's interesting actually, I went and took a look at a wooden chassised I think it was a London and South Western Railway wagon over at the East Lancs Railway, and we've got a bit of footage of that, and I had a look underneath, and they really are all wood. All of these cross members would have been wood with very little steel in place. So this appears to be a representation of a wagon built to a similar kind of construction. The top part of the wagon, well, the plastic of the injection moulding is actually quite thick. If we look on the top down, the sides are quite thick, but then again, wood would have been a substance used that would have been a lot thicker than steel construction wagons. So I've got no way of saying really whether that's too thick or not. To my eyes, I'm used to steel-sided 16-ton mineral wagons, so it looks quite thick, but I think it may actually be prototypically correct. When we look inside, we've got the representation of the, I suppose, unpainted wooden inner, and it's something that really, I don't think any of the manufacturers have managed to get the correct colour for the inside of a wagon. It's really hard to represent just bare, unpainted, weathered wood in any scale, really. So it's a reasonable colour. It doesn't look out of place, so we're going to let that slide. There's a little bit of planking detail. I'm looking against the light. I can see a representation for the planks going up the sides, but certainly this is a wagon that would benefit from having a load added. In terms of the outside, we've got very crisply realised end corner strapping. The rivets on there are all very crisp and clear, which is what you would expect from a new release injection moulded wagon. Be interesting to see how well this fares after a few years when they bring out newer wagons, whether the tooling has lasted pretty well. The buffer heads, they're metal, turned metal, they're not sprung, but certainly they're very, very fine. And it's nice to see. I mean, when I was growing up, you used to get very used to moulded buffer heads as part of the chassis, and they always used to have a parting line straight across the middle of the head, which to me was a big detraction, but none of that on here. It is really nicely done. On the underframe detail, we've got all of the metal bits nicely picked out with the tampo printing, and it's very, very clear. There's no smudging, there's no paint going where it shouldn't, and that's really clearly done. I could also see there, I can't read them at all with my naked eyes, but we're going to get in there with a macro lens and try and read those works plates, and that'll give us a clue as to what time period this wagon is actually supposed to be from in terms of if there's a build date on there. So I'm really interested to see how those come up under magnification. And I'll be honest with you, going off what I've seen on wagons from all the other manufacturers, the standard of this tampo printing is just really, really exquisite. So I've got no reason to believe that these will be anything other. We've also got the tear weights and the load weights there in a very, very fine white print. And again, there doesn't seem to be any sign of smudging. That's really nicely realised. And then the main livery itself, it's on this very light base grey coat. It's almost a photographic grey, the kind of grey that they used to paint wagons and locomotives in for the purposes of doing official portraits, and the entire wagon's in that grey. As a coal wagon, I doubt it would have stayed anywhere near this clean for very long at all, but certainly I like my private owner wagons to be pristine clean. If you want to weather them, you can do, and certainly the planking detail looks like it would really come out nice with a little bit of an addition of a weathering wash. But the lettering on there, again, is really crisply done, and we've got this kind of cream main body for the lettering, and then we've got a sort of a serif in the, it's like a red colour, but it does look really nice, and it gives this illusion almost like the letters are raised off the planking sides of the wagon. They're not, but certainly it does pick them out nicely. Both ends of the wagons are entirely the same, I'm looking there, and we've got these end posts. They're really chunky. You can see all the coach bolts through there which would hold the planks in place. It's all nicely done. I can't see any air gaps underneath any of the separately applied pieces. It's all really nicely done. The brake gear underneath, we've got these bits. They're all actually metal, separately applied metal, and this is one of the areas where Hornby has gone above and beyond what some of the other manufacturers are bringing out. We've got the split spoke, it's very hard to say that actually, split spoke wheels there, turned metal from Hornby, really nicely done, and they've got a kind of a chemical blackening on them as well, so they don't look too garish. The brake blocks all line up with the wheel treads as they should, and it really is a lovely, lovely package here. Couplings as well, they're in these NEM pockets, but they've got a different way of mounting them to the likes of Bachmann and Oxford Rail. And actually, I have to say, if this springy little tail is durable enough, they do look to be a slightly better way of mounting, because they're screw fit in there. So if you get any kind of damage or you want to change these for a different type of coupling, it may be the case that it gives you a few more options in there. And they've also, the way they've mounted them, they've kind of got the tails of these NEM pockets hidden behind the faces of the wheels. So in a side-on view, the couplings aren't actually too prominent. Overall, I'd have to say that this wagon gets a good solid 9.9 out of 10. It's up there in a league with the 3-plank wagon that Hornby did and that we've reviewed a couple of examples of so far. And it's certainly streets ahead of the 5-plank and the 8-plank, which came previously from Hornby. So Hornby have to be applauded for the attention to detail to this wagon. Would I buy more of them? Yes, certainly. This wagon is of a high, if not higher standard than any other wagon that's available ready to run in double out on the market, and I'm very pleased with this example. Well, I hope that was informative to you. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to like this video, share it too, and also subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so, and ring that bell and you will be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And also don't forget, you can follow me on Instagram at jennifer.e.kirk, and also if you really like this video, you can also check out my Patreon account too. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take very good care of yourself, and bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And a special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Mark Anthony, Michael Churchwood, and Mark McShane. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.